Good evening and welcome to the Township of Chatham Township Committee meeting for September the 22nd, 2016. Tom, has adequate notice been given?
Yes, Mayor, adequate notice of this meeting of the Township Committee was given as required by the Open Public Meetings Act as follows. Notice was given to both the Chatham Courier and the Morris County Daily Record on January 8th, 2016. A notice was posted on the bulletin board in the main hallway of the municipal building on January 8, 2016, and notice was filed with the Township Clerk on January 8, 2016.
Thank you. Would you all please rise to the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Tom.
Mr. Gallup?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Mrs. Swartz?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sullivan?
He's out.
He's out.
He's a prior
and
commitment.
Mayor Ritter.
Here. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
First item up is our National Farm to School Month proclamation. Before we begin, I invite a couple of members of our community, Susan and Andrea, to come up and if anyone would like to come up and say a few words before we read the proclamation. Oh, sorry. The microphone.
Okay.
And just state your name and address for the record.
Susan Tracino, 712 River Road, Chatham Township. Thank you so much for inviting us this evening. We're so delighted to be here to accept the proclamation for acknowledging October as Farm to School Month here in Chatham Township, and acknowledging the work of our very dedicated volunteers in making lots of interesting gardens at now 5 out of 6 of our schools here in Chatham, and planning lots of interesting activities to promote veggie power to all of our students here in Chatham throughout the month of October.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Andriana Field, River Road, 733. Resident here for 16 years. And as Susan said, we have a passion for gardening and environmental awareness as well. And we'd like to share that as part of Farm to School theme. You know, educating our kids on better ways and healthier ways of eating are extremely important, something that is quite limited in teaching at schools. And hopefully this is an avenue by which Dr. L'Souza and the schools can actually incorporate it as part of their curriculum, which they do intend through the science curriculum here in Chatham, K to 12. And it provides a wonderful opportunity for the students to learn tactile and sensory gardens as well. So we're looking forward to doing some great things for our students here in Chatham. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And perhaps there's an opportunity. I know that a lot of the schools have gardens of their own, but I'm sure the community gardening could always use an extra pair of hands to
Absolutely.
tow the fields. So I'll read the proclamation here. Whereas parents of the school district of the Chathams, as well as administrators and health professionals, formed the Chatham Farm to School Committee in 2015. And whereas October is National Farm to School Month, designated by Congress in 2010 to demonstrate the growing importance of farm to school programs as a means to improve child nutrition, support local economies, and educate children about the origins of food. And whereas the New Jersey Department of Agriculture's Jersey Fresh Farm to School program works to connect schools with New Jersey farmers to source more than 100 types of Jersey Fresh produce grown here in the Garden State. And whereas during the National Farm to School Month, the school district of the Chathams Food Service will focus on serving local vegetables and fruits for Farm to School Month to promote our local Jersey Fresh harvests, as well as Chatham School Garden harvests. And whereas serving locally grown produce in school cafeterias not only supports local farmers, but helps improve student nutrition, provide healthy options, and nutrition education opportunities that will last a lifetime, while educating students about local farms and the local ecosystem. And whereas classroom education on locally grown fruits and vegetables will also take place in the school district during the month of October because it is a proven way to induce students to try new fruits and vegetables. Therefore, be it proclaimed by the Township Committee of the Township of Chatham that they hereby join in celebrating the month of October as National Farm to School Month and applaud the Chatham Farm to School Committee for promoting locally grown produce and healthy nutrition programs for our students during National Farm to School Month in the school district of the Chathams. If you want to join us.
Vegetable of the month, that's right. Excellent.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, this week as well.
I got it.
Our next item on the agenda is our Tri-Town 55 Plus survey results. I'll turn it over to Karen to give us an introduction.
That's great. Thank you, Your Honor. I have had, over the last couple of years, the great pleasure of working with the health officer that we share with the Borough of Madison and the Borough of Chatham, Lisa Gulla. Lisa is educated in an awful lot of things, and particularly in the process of applying for grants, and she's been terrific in working together with Madison Borough, Chatham Borough, and the Township to coordinate with the Grotta Foundation for a grant that we put together along with John Krauthamel of our senior services, the senior services of the Chathams. So together we've formed the Tri-Town 55 Plus Coalition, and it has been a real honor and a real privilege to work with these folks. So Lisa, without further ado, I will hand it over to you and watch you set up this projector. The Tri-Town 55 Plus Coalition, as those of you who have been listening to me for the last couple of years, really involves making our community an age-friendly community, whether it's matters of affordability, transportation, et cetera. And so the 55 Plus Coalition is focused strictly on that. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
And thank you, John, for being here as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. And as you mentioned, John Krauthamel, who is our current chairperson of our coalition, is here with me. Basically, as Karen mentioned, last year we received a grant from the Grotta Foundation for conducting a needs assessment for the seniors of our communities and to look at what we can do to become more age-friendly communities and basically looking at lifelong Chatham Borough, lifelong Madison, and how can we do that. So the data I'm going to present to you are the results of the survey that was conducted by an independent research organization, which was through Montclair State. Their initials are CREEHS, and it's the Center for Research and Evaluation of Health Studies. I'm actually impressed I remembered their whole name. But they did this for us, so this way we had an independent person looking at it. I do want to just say that also when we get to the recommendations at the end, I'm going to explain what the coalition is looking at achieving. But all of the recommendations, again, were from the outside researcher based on, not only our data, but then what is going on throughout the country and in our state to address some of these issues. Our main objective, as I mentioned, was to do the needs assessment. It is age 55 plus, so that is where our name came from, Tri-Town 55 plus. So the Grata Fund, their mission is focused on improving quality of life of older adults and their families. They've awarded more than $4 million in grants to over 55 agencies throughout New Jersey. Towns that have received the same grant as us included Ridgewood, Montclair, South Orange, and Maplewood as a coalition, Plainfield, Elizabeth, Garfield, Teaneck, Westwood, and Englewood. And the nice part of this is that one of Grata's requirements is that you attend information sharing sessions with your other grantees, so that we were able to, we're not constantly reinventing the wheel. They were giving us ideas of how did you get the word out to get people to do the surveys. So one of the tips we took from one of our towns is they had used postcards. So we had done postcard mailings to everyone, or a random sampling of every person registered in the electoral votes of 55 plus. So that was able to help us get quite a few people. Our survey was administered online as well as by hard copy. It had approximately 60 questions. It was quite detailed, and I think our biggest challenge was to pare it down, to make it not as elaborate, but everybody wanted a lot of information while we could get it. So, because you don't get to have these opportunities very often. But we really focused on community strengths, healthcare, transportation, walkability, housing, affordability, and volunteerism. Just to get an idea of how we did our sample, there was a plus or minus 5% rate that we were looking for. So we did our 2010 census population estimates. So the total population, our survey goal was 375. And I believe we ended up with 360 usable surveys. So that was actually really terrific. So that kept us within our plus or minus. Our survey respondents, you can just see, quite honestly, Chatham Township exceeded our number estimate, which was wonderful. And I actually accredit that to our volunteers that got the word out for us. But as you see, we were looking for 111 in Chatham Township, and we had 119 usable surveys. So I thought that was terrific. So we asked them not only about what their needs would be or their concerns, we asked them, you know, what are your assets? What do we have in these towns that keep you here? So their assets that they identified were their libraries, their senior centers, the people, the atmosphere of the communities, the location, the schools, the Madison YMCA, the walkability, community programs, and the train and rail service. So one of the quotes from the focus group, I think it's a small town atmosphere, but yet it's in a big area where you have access to everything, big city, beach, mountains. So I think maybe location and the small town feeling. Some of the other thoughts of our respondents on some of the assets. I feel very safe, and I like the small town feel to both Madison and Chatham because it's almost like we're one town. We're so close to each other, and we have two police forces, which makes you feel even safer. And regarding the Madison YMCA, a lot of socialization, and they get healthy, and we have a lot of special need programs that are coming in. We have a Parkinson's program, Live Strong for Cancer, Diabetes, and for MS, we're starting a new program. So you know it's a great place for people to come. And the last one was plus one big asset is the railroad, our trains into the city. Train goes from Dover to New York City, so people who don't drive anymore have that aspect. And in the full report we gave you, there's a little bit more details. I just pulled out a few of the fun quotes. Some of the needs they expressed, they really would like to stay in town, but they're unable to find housing appropriate for their needs in their budget. For transportation, those who no longer drive sometimes lose their sense of independence and can become further isolated because of the transportation options that are currently available. And they're limited in terms of availability, days availability, and places accessible. And again, remember that I'm giving you our overall information, but this ran the gamut of seniors at 55 all the way up to, I think our oldest was 92. So walkability, seniors are deterred from walking in Madison and Chatham Borough because of safety concerns such as speeding vehicles, traffic, unsafe crossings, uneven pavement, and lack of sidewalks. And the final piece was communication. The towns need a senior-friendly, centralized source of information such as a telephone number, mail, radio, or local television station. One of the pieces we found that was really interesting was that our 55-plussers really are still a higher majority, and it could be because there's a lot of older seniors still. A high majority of them are really focusing on paper information. You know, they're not fully using the internet and the websites and social media the way we would like them to. So one of the things the coalition will be looking at is what do we need to do now to keep our seniors informed, and how can we also usher them in to the internet age? Because we know that it's absolutely more affordable to go with social media, but if the message isn't getting out and they're not getting the information, then how do we get that out to them and make this make them feel more included in the community? So some of the needs quotes, and I'm not sure if we can read it all, but I'm not sure I can afford to have the kind of housing I would like. A nice small house or townhouse that affords some privacy, but within walking distance of downtown and transportation to other areas of New Jersey. I think all ages would benefit from a downtown shuttle. It would be useful for our kids and cut down on parking and congestion in town. Environmentally positive. I'm not interested in things that isolate older people from the community. I like to walk for exercise and fresh air, but I'm concerned for my safety while I walk. People, and not just teens, drive too fast in neighborhoods. I would like to see articles in the local paper about good driving habits. I'd also like to see crosswalk rules enforced. We keep talking about going on the town's website. That's a passive way to communicate. We put things out in the local newspaper. That's got a terrible circulation right now. The other two are Tap Into and Patch, and those are online, but they're passive, so we have to somehow continue to assess how we're communicating, as opposed to making people come to you. It's difficult to use any service when the information on how to access it isn't available. So the independent researchers came up with 4 recommendations. You're going to see 2 have numbers and 2 have bullets. So I will explain that after I go over them. But the first recommendation was that each of the 3 towns should create a senior-friendly, centralized source of information, such as a telephone number, regular mailing, or local radio or television broadcast that could share news and resources as well as advertise community events. Each town should consider expanding its senior bus or van schedule to accommodate a greater number of available hours per day and per week. The 3 towns should collectively create a position for a senior coordinator who could oversee the implementation of action steps emerging from this needs assessment. And Madison and Chatham Borough should address safety concerns that deter seniors from walking in town, such as speeding vehicles, traffic, unsafe crossings, uneven pavement, and lack of sidewalks. So, the first 2 are really what the coalition is going to be focusing on. Those are very achievable and attainable, and things we can do with the resources we have. The other 2 are a little bit more difficult nuts to crack, and so we're not really in that position to address them. So while we appreciated their recommendations, we're not sure yet if that's something that we can address as the coalition in our first year.
Are you talking about the top 2 or the bottom 2?
The top 2. Number 1 and 2 are what we're going to try and achieve. The bottom 2 are just not really in our financial, physical means at this point. So that is something for consideration down the road, but that's more, you know, especially the last one is really something that's more of a strategic plan or a master plan to be addressed. You know, maybe down the road we can assist with giving them data or get volunteers to help do walkability. There's resources for that, but I don't see it as something that we can initially really move forward on.
For number 1, did they take into account that our senior center has a website and a Facebook page? And
yes.
I'm not quite sure what more we could do outside of regular mailings, which seems a little
Right. And
prohibitive, quite frankly.
correct. And so one of the things the coalition is actually looking at is we are, I might be jumping ahead, but I'll jump there. So Tri-Town has been approved for the Phase 2 grant and Part A. So the grant funds that we're looking at utilizing for this current year, and the likelihood is, as long as we're successful in Part A of Phase 2 grant, we'll get the remaining grant funds for this year, and there's potential for another 2 years of funding. One of the things we're looking at focusing on, and I agree with you, it can be cost prohibitive, but that's where we come in. Doing something that could potentially be continuing with postcards, with maybe upcoming events or something like that, that we can do under our grant funding is what we're looking at, is trying to get people, and maybe one of the things we have discussed, and again, nothing's set in stone yet, we've just had our first meeting, but we've really started talking about what can we do, because we know the senior centers have computer classes and things like that, but sometimes some of the seniors are embarrassed that they don't have the skills or they're concerned, so we're looking at, do we want to maybe offer volunteers to be available for one-on-one sessions? So, for this year, we may want to continue to do postcards or something to keep reminding someone to, come see the website, come do this, and here's what's going on, but for more information, go here, or go to the library and have somebody use the computer with you. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bridge that gap and get more of the seniors comfortable with using the social media and getting involved with it. So we're looking at taking on that challenge for the 3 communities and doing that as a whole. Yes.
I'm sorry. So I look at the last bullet point of speeding vehicles or unsafe crossings, and it seems to me like that's actually low-hanging fruit, where, we had an issue at Lafayette and stepped up enforcement there, find out where the seniors are saving their unsafe crossings and see if there's something that can be done about that. It seems to me that those are the easy things we could do quickly to, little things can make a difference. And if there's an unsafe crossing that prevents someone from getting to a shopping center, that could be remediated easily by stepped-up police or traffic cones or something, that might be easy to do.
And it may be, when we were looking at it, and obviously I'm giving you very abridged of the bullet points, and you can read it in the recommendations a little in more detail. I think our biggest concern, and I would ask John if he has any comments or input with it as well, our biggest concern was we're a new coalition, we're very young, so to speak, and we didn't feel comfortable going to the township or either of the boroughs and saying, okay, so we need this. Now, that's why we're doing these presentations. Anything that the township or either borough feels something that we can assist with, we're there to do that. Does that make sense? We just didn't want to come in and say, okay, now we're doing a walkability study. We just got this needs assessment and we're going to do another project. We wanted to do things that were, I don't want to use the word non-threatening, but didn't seem like we were coming in like bulls in a china shop saying, okay, now we have these recommendations. We need this, 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 and this. We wanted to handle things that we felt we could do, and we can be proactive on specifically. But the reason to do these presentations and to give everyone the reports is for each community to decide what they feel might be low-hanging fruit that we can also help with. So we're not we're not against doing any of the recommendations. We just wanted to do it, things that we knew we could take on without having to get the other community involved financially or otherwise. So we're trying to focus on what we think we can handle as a small group just starting out. But we're absolutely open to it, and if you think that's something we can work on. I do know that John went to a training, one of the Grata grantees' presentations, and there was someone there that will do some walkability projects, and we're not sure how much she costs, if anything, or if they'll do it for free, but I believe it utilized volunteers as well. Is that right? So that's something we actually did discuss, but we said, okay, we'll start working on talking to her, but let's get moving and get our volunteers involved. The other thing that's a big goal for us is we had a very small amount of members right now because everything happened so fast this past year. So one of the other goals is really to expand the coalition and get more buy-in and get more partners to do some of these things. So we have to figure out what we can physically do with our 10 people until we get it to be 20 or 30.
I think something else that's worth reminding everybody is that this is a tri-town coalition.
Right.
And so when you start talking about walkability and you do something for Madison Borough, you better be prepared to turn around and do it for Chatham Borough and address the needs in the township. And, you know, you've got police forces you want to offer these suggestions to, and they fix that sidewalk but not mine.
Right.
So you really have to make sure you can create an area of solution
Right.
that's going to impact all three communities.
And one of the things we were very conscious of is that while the three communities are very close, they all have some very specific individual needs as well. So, you know, if we brought forth that we're going to do walkability, we need to come and do all three communities. However, if you decide that's something you would like us to focus on for Chatham Township and the other two towns aren't ready to do that, we have that ability to do that. But we had to decide what can we do for all three communities until someone says to us, hey, you know, can you guys take this on? Which we'll be able to do as we build our membership up. Any other questions so far? So our next steps, I kind of started talking a little bit, and you had the perfect phrase, what's low-hanging fruits for us? So that was, as I mentioned, it's really starting to get that information out there of what's available, building our coalition. We're going to look at some transportation options. We're meeting with Trans Options. We're also going to look at what we want to do with our grant funding to potentially make more opportunities. One example I continually use that we now have to look into is Uber has a project, has a program for age-friendly communities where they'll offer reduced rates for seniors to be able to get where they need to be. So we're looking at that right now. But our first 3 months, because Part A of the second grant is for 3 months, and then the remaining months you'll get subsequently, and it's a total of $75,000. So our first 3 months we've put in $24,000. It's partially funding our executive director and a lot of branding. We're working on branding and getting the word out and spending money on getting literature out and letting people know what's available to them. We're also working on that information line. So some of it may also be that we may send a couple of postcards out really just focusing on our website and our info line, which will be connected to the senior center. The website, we're going to have it cross-promoted and getting this information line, so maybe if people at least are using the phone, that benefits seniors in two ways, especially those that are isolated. One, it's giving them that communication. They wanted the two-way communication, but more importantly, for those that are isolated, it's connecting them with somebody. Because quite often it's that friendly call piece they want, and they want that connection with somebody. The other piece is we have decided as a coalition to become incorporated. So we just recently received our incorporation, so we're Tri-Town 55 PLUS LLC because they wouldn't allow us to have a plus sign, but also known as Tri-Town 55 Plus because we like our logo. So we were just recently incorporated, and now we're working on our paperwork to become a 501c3, which will really open up quite a few doors for us for grant applications. As I mentioned, the Grata Fund, we can get $75,000, I believe, for up to 3 years. And another funder, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, is a big funder of age-friendly communities. So once we have ourselves on more solid ground, then we'd like to go for that one, which is an additional $50,000. Or we could choose to wait for another 3-year cycle so that when the Grata money's gone, that's next part. Because, as I mentioned, our focus is going to have to be coalition building, getting initially out there and getting our name out and people knowing us, and then it's going to be sustainability of the projects we create. So that's all the key pieces of what we're focusing on now. And I'm going to see if John would like to add anything that I forgot. And he's looking at me like, probably not. Wrap it up? You're good? Oh, keep going. I think I'm done. So unless you have questions, does anybody have any other questions that I can, oh. You're done? I'm done. Okay. Oh, yes, I'm done. So I'm going to let John say a few words.
Okay, one thing is that an age-friendly towns are friendly for everybody, and that's sort of our mantra. For example, all the street corners have the sloping street corners for handicap, but it's also good for parents with toddlers, you know, in carriages. So that's one of our mantras. Age-friendly is friendly for everybody. Okay, next week we're setting up a meeting next week with the geriatric social worker at Morristown Hospital. She is very interested in working with us. And again, we're working with everybody. We're not in competition with anybody. Because that was brought up at one point during our organization. The officers in Tri-Town, two of us are on the Chatham Senior Center. Lisa and the head of the Madison Senior Center is also an officer in Tri-Town. So we are working with everybody. We hope to give this presentation to Chambers of Commerce, Kiwanis, Rotaries. One of the things we want to do is go to the businesses through the Rotaries and the business community. And there is Grata Foundation has a checklist of things that stores and businesses can be age-friendly. And they can do that checklist, then we would give them a little sticker to put up in their window that they are age-friendly and stuff like that, just so that the seniors know this type of thing. New Jersey Transit, we know, comes into your community and will take groups of seniors, because everybody has doctor's appointments between Morristown and Summit and all over. They will come in and take groups of seniors on the buses, which now run between Main Street and Turnpike. They will take them, groups of seniors on the buses, to show them how the buses work and how the whole system works, and I hope they will also do it for the trains also. So that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at right now, getting off the ground.
Well, I thank you and I commend you for your work. I know it's earlier this year when Karen was helping promote and getting people to go out and take the survey. Was yeoman's work, and I think it's very important to what you said. You know, we want to ensure that certainly Chatham Township remains a age-friendly place. We have a lot of young families moving to town, and sometimes people might think that it's only focused on the younger group, but you know, the important thing is we have all walks of life in our town, and young and old. So I appreciate your efforts and your work, and hopefully this is only the beginning of, you know, some great things to come.
Thank you. We're excited. Thank you again.
Thanks for being here. That's great, you guys. We appreciate it.
We'll move on now to reports. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Probably a good segue from the farm to school topic earlier is the report from the community garden. And they're having their cleanup weekend this weekend, where they're encouraging the people who have wrapped it up for the season to clean up the different stems and husks and things and get their plot ready for the winter. I know some people are continuing on growing some fall crops as well, so there'll be activity there continuing. And also between now and the end of the year is the time for people who are already plot holders to re-register for next year, and then they'll be starting to look at the vacancies and be soliciting for next year. So again, tying into the farm to school, if there are people in your organization who have been thinking about having their own plot, please spread the word that there'll be openings coming up, and it'll be a good time to start thinking about registering. Also, the Open Space Committee had its trail project just last weekend, and this was wood chipping and outlining the trails on the Hillside Avenue property. It went well, but there's more to do, so they'll be looking to the future to revisit that project. And that's it, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Bob?
Joint rec, the only issue that was raised was as to Lum Field, it looks like we'll be able to get one more year of use out of the artificial turf. And then the big ticket item will be the resurfacing of Lum, and the town and the borough will talk about reaching a funding mechanism for that, and that'll probably set the precedent for down the road how Shumpike is going to be funded when its turn comes to be resurface. So, but looks like they're going to get another 1 year out of Plum. So it's always good to kick something down the road for a year. Yes.
Did they make mention at all in terms of, I think last year they plowed Lum to get the snow off, and whether or not that's recommended, so to speak, or?
That wasn't discussed. I mean, it was, I think it's understood that Shumpike is not going to be plowed. And I think part of the reason they did Lum was because they knew it was at the end of its useful life. And, that's something that when Lum is redone, that's, you know, a topic that can be discussed at that point. But I think it's generally understood it's not the greatest practice, and certainly on a new turf like ours. But again, I think it was done at Lum because it was at the end of its useful life, and I guess the risk reward was in favor of the reward.
Yeah.
Short-term gain.
Yes. Thanks, Bob. Karen?
All righty, thank you, Your Honor. Just to continue with our seniors vein, October's newsletter is online and jam full of activities here at the Chatham Senior Center. They are looking ahead towards 10/26 flu shots and the 10/29 shred event at Lafayette Avenue School, so mark your October calendars for those events. And the Welcome Back Senior Picnic is scheduled for tomorrow. It's going to be a nice warm day, which is hard to believe it's going to be an end of summer picnic. But hopefully everybody has already called in with their intention to be there. I think in the years that Mike and I have been sharing our communications with our Department of Public Works, we've never had the chance to say there's nothing going on. Every time we talk to our Department of Public Works, it is really all hands on deck. So this week is no exception. They are right in the middle of 3 seasons between closing up Colony Pool, breaking it down, emptying the pool, all of which has been done for the most part, cleaning out all 1,021 catch basins around town, inspecting for any damage and repairs that may need to be done. They're still dragging fields for baseball, for fall ball is still underway, as well as striping and lining fields for soccer. And much to my chagrin, our friend Rich Young mentioned that they're preparing the salt spreaders already. So not to push the timetable at all, but there's always a lot going on with our Department of Public Works. And if you drive by Little Red Schoolhouse, you can see the repair work being done to the parking lot and the curbing there, working on repairing potholes as usual, and that sort of thing. So that's what's going on for me, Your Honor.
Thank you much. Just a few items on my plate. I think everyone who has signed up for the Act Now alerts today saw that we published the September-October e-newsletter. If you didn't receive it, it's a good opportunity for you to go online and register for the Act Now alerts. And the newsletter is available on the website itself. A reminder, on October 18th, we're going to be hosting a domestic violence presentation in partnership with the Jersey Battered Women's Service. More information to come on that, so keep posted on the website as well as the Facebook page. Again, reminder that September is National Preparedness Month. That was included in the communication today, and it's also in the newsletter. We encourage all families to make note of this as the winter months approach, prone to power outages and other issues as we've seen in the past with winter storms. You can go to ready.gov/prepare, fill out forms to create a communications plan for your family and how best to be prepared for any kind of an emergency. Earlier this week, I was fortunate enough to attend a town hall hosted by Governor Christie regarding his fairness formula. This is a topic that's been discussed many months ago. I thought it was a great conversation hearing from the governor himself in terms of the benefits to this and creating a fair formula in terms of how school funding is determined throughout the state. Under his proposal, it would actually provide for an average property tax savings of about $3,800 a household. So it's pretty significant if this were to come to fruition. Obviously, it's in the early stages and whatnot, but more to come on that in the respect in the months to come. But as the governor said, he's term limited, and this is going to be a priority for him focusing on for the next year and change. So it was good news on that front. Also earlier this week, I was privileged to perform my second wedding of my tenure here. So I just want to wish JP and Evelyn Perlman the best in their nuptials and a long, happy life together. And then one other item, Out of Darkness Walk. I appreciate Tapp, Curry, and others who helped promote this, and everyone else who's been working on this committee, who was here last week. A reminder, it's going to be taking place this Saturday, September 24th at 9 a.m. at the high school. It's truly amazing what's taking place. We've got over 450 walkers. We've raised in excess of $50,000, which is 5 times our original goal. We expect Governor Cody to come by, as well as Congressman Frelinghuysen, and it's going to be a great event. So if anyone out there who still has an interest in participating, you can go to the website afsp.org/ChathamTWP. And then a reminder to everyone that the school referendum vote is next Tuesday. John?
Thank you, Mayor. I did inquire to the New Jersey Department of Transportation regarding the status of the Safe Routes to School grant. I was getting concerned regarding the timetable that was laid out months ago, that the anticipation was that the construction would start in September, summer of next year. And to meet that time frame, the process that they were in was securing, negotiating a price with their consultant, and ultimately once they negotiate that price, it would come to us to award that contract, and then the engineering would proceed, and then you ultimately, knowing the time frame associated with and the deadlines you have to meet with the federal highway requirements, that we're running down to the wire here, that they need to get their consultant, need to get the consultant started so that surveying can be done before the winter hits, potential for snow. We need to basically have bid documents done in January so you can go out to bid, and there's an extended period that you have to be out to bid with federal projects, and the award comes in. It's just a number of steps that need to be done. So I am pushing them to try to complete their first phase of just negotiating that fee and get that consultant on board so that they can complete the design. While speaking with them, they did identify that there was one document that the township does have to prepare. Every grant recipient, they have to prepare a federal grant management policy and procedure manual. And it's an interesting document because really what the requirement is that you take their federal regulations, put it in a document, put your name on it, and then that's your policy and procedures. You know, frankly, they should have just a form that you sign saying that you're going to agree it, but nevertheless, they make you go through the motion of creating this policy manual, and perhaps they just want to really have the policies and procedures really sink in of this is what you're going to get yourself into. And one of the key things with these the procedures that you have to follow with federal requirements is you do have to assign a responsible and charge person, and that person has to be a full-time employee, and that's going to be Tom. And so basically, it does spell out a lot of the responsibilities that person has to do, and it identifies your standard procedure. So that document, I have prepared it. To be frank, I already prepared a similar document for Denville. It wasn't difficult to change Denville to Chatham and just tweak a few things. But that ultimately does need to be submitted to Trenton for their review and approval. They do require, as part of that submittal, an endorsement or just acknowledgement that it wasn't the consultant that prepared it, but it was, in fact, reviewed by the township. And in many cases, it's simply the administrator writing a letter indicating that I reviewed it, I approved it, and good. So we can need to address this either two ways, either a formal resolution or the authority is just be delegated to the administrator just to write that letter and forward the documents down to Trenton. So I defer to Tom how he wants to proceed. You have to be.
There'll be a resolution on your next agenda for you to adopt accepting and approving the manual.
So we'll do it next meeting. Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, what are you going to preview? We did receive bids for the municipal building generator improvements. It was received today. There was only one bid. The bid was higher than anticipated. I haven't discussed this with Tom, but likely I'm going to recommend that we rebid. Just because there wasn't, just receiving one bid is not sufficient. I'm not sure why we didn't receive other bids. It could have just been there was a number of bids on the street at the time, and contractors were just selective, and they just didn't apply to us. But if we go out to bid again, maybe extend the bid period a little bit further. But I think the scope of the work is relatively straightforward, and we could still get this work done this year, easy enough. So, and the other two construction projects that will be going forward this fall is the Wickham Woods drainage and the Colony Pool replacement wall replacement project. The contractor has not given me a firm date to start, but I am in communication with him to make sure that, frankly, the Colony Pool wall is a priority, and make sure that gets done, first, and because it is the same contractor, and he did indicate he's likely going to have 2 crews, but I certainly want him to focus on the wall first and make sure that we did have to rebid that project, so we're a little bit behind schedule, but we still have sufficient time to get that in this year.
Great.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
2 brief things, Mayor. First, we conducted a bond anticipation note sale earlier this week for the $800,000 sewer project, the ordinance that was adopted recently for the improvements at the WPC treatment plant. That was not done for a full year. If you recall, what we discussed was to do it for a shorter period, so it'll mature the same time as the notes that we did back in July. The successful bidder was actually the Township of East Brunswick with a net interest cost of 1.24%. There were 2 other bidders, Roosevelt and Cross and Oppenheimer and Company. As you can now see, municipalities are permitted to invest in these types of opportunities. It's not something that we've ever done because typically we don't have that much cash that we can tie up for a year, or in this case 9 months. But our friend Lou Neely down in East Brunswick does. So this is something that he does as part of his duties as the East Brunswick CFO. He's, if you guys don't know him, I'm surprised. He's a frequent contributor to the League of Municipalities magazine, frequent writer about financial matters in the state of New Jersey, and quite an interesting and bright individual. So anyway, that's done. So 1.24% for the 800,000. And then the second thing to report, Mrs. Swartz and I met earlier this week with the representatives from the county MUA about the recycling contract, which expires at the end of this year. So we had a preliminary meeting to go over some minor changes to the contract moving forward and to talk about the price. They have a price in mind for the renewal to continue the service as it is with every other week, but we did request that they provide us again with the option for weekly, since we anticipate that there will be members of the community that will again ask for that and perhaps advocate for that. So because we don't have those numbers yet, we're not prepared to actually make a recommendation on the contract, but I expect to have that in time for the October 13th meeting. A couple minor, couple little things that would be significant changes. One of which would be to include holiday makeups. In the past, when a collection day fell on a holiday, we were given an option of having a makeup day sometime subsequent, and that option was always kind of exercised by me and was not built into the contract, and we kind of would haggle over the price for that. We have always done a makeup day when a holiday fell on a collection day. So this time going forward, they've included the makeup days in the calendar for the years in which collection dates fall on a holiday, and they'll be reflected in the price as well. So you'll see that when you see the final numbers. The other thing that we talked about was more of an operational issue. And for any of you who have been down to the recycling drop-off depot, you know that there, I think, are 4 open containers that people put their material in. There have been occasions when loads have been rejected at the recycling processing plant because they were covered with snow and ice or they were too wet. So they're really pushing us to cover them in some fashion. As an alternative, and I think it's probably the best alternative, we're looking at having the MUA at their cost install a compactor unit there. We would provide a concrete pad and electric service to operate it, and then an individual to operate it. We do always have the recycling center staffed when it's open anyway, so that would not be really an issue. That would allow us to do away with the open containers, or at least 3 of the 4. We would probably keep 1 as a backup in the event that the compactor broke or there was a power outage or anything like that. So that's something that we're anticipating including as a recommendation also going forward. So those will be the main changes that you'll see for 2017 and on. It would be a 3-year contract with options for 2 one-year renewals.
Great.
Is there any-
I'm sorry, if we consider going to weekly recycling, would we consider closing down the recycling?
Well, that's something, Bob, that I've always suggested, that, you know, it would seem to me to be a duplication. I don't really understand it now. I've never quite understood why it's such a popular service.
It's a small town feel thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, it really is. It apparently is, you know, is the local barber shop. It's, you know, the place where people go to congregate and talk politics and decide who they're going to vote for in November, I guess. So I don't really understand it, but it is
actually
popular.
Most of the people there are the 0 and 1 to 4s and don't vote that much. It's not a good place to go. But it should be. My point is, it should be part of the analysis how much we would save by closing it down if we explore that.
Yeah, it would certainly would be something I think we'd need to look at.
And Tom,
Yes.
one resident mentioned to me that a couple times they'd gone down and the dumpsters were full and overflowing, but it sounds like the solution is going to solve that.
I think the compactor would go a long way to solving that, yes, because obviously it's going to compress the material. We do, and I talked to Rich Young about this as well, we do try to compress it with a front-end loader or bucket loader at the present time, but I don't know what happened that day. That really should not happen. We should be able to, you know, tamp those down pretty well, but unless it was just a particularly heavy week. So.
Is that covered by the contract between now and the expiration date, for example? Does the MUA by contract have to pick it up on a certain schedule, or is it more of a...
They come when we call them. So, you know, typically I think if we're open on Saturday, you know, on Monday or Tuesday, it's full and we call them and they come and get it. So that is part of the thinking going forward as well. If we don't do the compactor, we need to at least pack down these units as best we can to reduce the number of times that the MUA pulls them out, because I think they charge us on a per pull time. So if we can, you know, pull them every 10 days instead of every 5 days, that's going to save us money as well. Not big money, but some money.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom. Chief? Good. All right, we'll now open up for the hearing of citizens. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are not topics scheduled for public hearing tonight. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes.
Hello.
How you doing?
I have to say something.
Could you just, again, state your name for the record?
Okay. Name is Andriana Field, 733 River Road. Chatham Township resident for almost 16 years. So I've been here a while. And basically what my husband and what was so attractive about Chatham Township was the Dixie Dale farm, the Christmas tree farm, because it just brought back such great memories from when I was a kid and we'd go Christmas tree shopping. And we were able to continue that here. And driving by Dixie Dale is such a very pleasant ride along Hillside Avenue. You know, sometimes if my son happens to miss the school bus, you know, what's my route? Well, it's driving along Hillside Avenue because it's a very pleasant road, and I love seeing the trees. Now, unfortunately, yes, we all know, Dixie-Dale has been sold. I understand the resolution is forthcoming. I understand last week it got deferred yet again. And I hope that, details will be forthcoming. And I think, and I speak for a lot of residents here in the township, we are concerned. There's going to be a number of homes on that property, and we're legitimately concerned about traffic patterns. What is going to happen already when you go down Southern Boulevard at about 8:30, the traffic is almost half a mile long, all the way from Southern Boulevard, the turning of Lafayette, and all the way back up down Snake Hill. So if we see an influx of homes at Dixie-Dale, how are the traffic patterns going to be addressed? I think that's a very legitimate concern because it is a steep slope. The schoolhouse is on the top of the hill. I'm sure the details will be forthcoming, and we look forward to hearing from you. It's also one of our very last farms here in Chatham Township, and I hope that, there may be, certainly there are the open space trails that the Open Space Committee has been working on. So we're grateful for that green area there. It's also probably a steep slope, so nothing can be really done as far as, building-wise. So, but it is one of the last farms here in Chatham Township, and it's so sad to see that it has gone. That being said, we look forward to the details, Tom, whenever you have it. And I think I speak for a lot of citizens here in Chatham Township. Also the impact of the skate park. We'd like to hear, what is being planned because of school budget. Here we are, we're looking at a referendum that we are to vote on for the 27th. And we as citizens have to make sure that our school board is planning long term. If there's an influx of families, right now we're at max. We're at max at pretty much all the schools. So this can impact us from a capacity level. Not everybody can afford private schools, right? Would we love that luxury? Absolutely. But also, we love our town and our public schools. We think we have great teachers. We have a wonderful superintendent who cares about students and families, and we'd like to keep it that way. That's what brought us here to the town when we first got here. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts in taking care of the citizen population. But if you could disclose more information to the public, I think that would alleviate a lot of anxieties.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into any detail, but I think I can speak for everybody here in letting you know that there will be plenty of public discussion and opportunity for the community to comment on what's being proposed. It is in private hands, and they have a right to make application for development. Everybody's going to know what's on the table.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, and obviously, I probably speak on behalf of everyone in the committee here, that obviously we all take the best interests of our residents in mind before we proceed with anything. And as we indicated in the last meeting, our council needed more time to work on certain things. That's why these items were pulled from the agenda. But in the coming weeks and months, this will be a topic of discussion. So we welcome your comments today and in the future.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Christine Baird. I live at 375 Fairmount Avenue, which is right near the little schoolhouse at the intersection of Fairmount and Southern and Buxton. And I am hoping on behalf of my family and on my neighbors that we can get help trying to cross the street at the intersection there. My son walks to school, he's in 5th grade, and it's very, very difficult to get to the side where there's a contiguous sidewalk that goes all the way down to like Lafayette or Southern Boulevard School. I know through the Safe Routes to School Committee, we've been talking about possibly getting a TAP grant, looking at that intersection and the River Road intersection. But I hope that there's something we can do in the meantime to just help the kids get across the street. There's a bus stop that stops at that little Spitterland next to Buxton, and there's one crosswalk that goes across Fairmount Avenue. But even the kids that get off that bus to get across the street to the other side of Fairmount, they're afraid. Because I think, cars are not really expecting to see people there. And something needs to be done soon. It's a pretty dangerous situation.
Okay, well, we do have the TAP grant for discussion.
Okay,
this
good.
evening.
I just learned about that today, and I was coming by.
But in the interim, I suspect, I don't know, if there's something, Chief or Rich, we could look at that area and see if there's anything we can do to...
I mean, there aren't a lot of kids, but when the bus comes and they're getting off Summer Crossing, my son, he's got friends, they put school, there are a bunch of kids that live on Fairmount Avenue that were put in the same class, so they all became friends. And then to get to each other's houses, you have to drive. It's just...
Where does the bus stop right now?
The bus stops it kind of juts out right where Buxton Road is. There's that little piece of land there.
Right.
So I know a student that lives on the other side of Fairmount who has to cross over. There is one crosswalk and get the bus there. And so then when she gets off, she has to cross back over. And I think she's not even...
And which bus is that? That's to the middle school?
I don't even... Yeah, she's in the middle school. So...
All right, we'll look at that. It is a difficult intersection.
Right.
It's one that's been looked at many times. Those are county roads, county signals.
Right.
And, coming up the hill, visibility is not great. So it definitely is a difficult intersection, and it is
Well, that's what we were wondering if...
It is one that's high on our list to see what we can do with.
Okay. I mean, I don't know, as you said, coming up the hill, that would be really difficult, but if I don't know if things can be done to some crosswalks and not others. We were told that if something had to be done everywhere, if anything was going to be done, and that just fixing one. But there is one crosswalk there already, so at least getting across Southern Boulevard would be a help.
Yeah.
Getting across Fairmount on the other side, you can kind of, with the church, work with the driveway and get across it. Otherwise, it's pretty tough.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, we'll close out the public hearing. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Tom, you want to read those off for us?
Yes, the consent agenda contains items that may be passed by a single roll call vote. Any committee member may call for a separate discussion on or vote on any of the items. The resolutions, there are 7 of them. They're all going to be resolution 2016-something. So I'm going to read them. 2016-184 is receipt of reports. 185 is approving meeting minutes. 186 is approving executive session minutes. 187 is refunding an overpayment of taxes. 188 is amending a developer's agreement. 189 is appointing DPW employees. And 190 is approving a social affair permit. So a motion to approve the agenda.
Mayor, before we vote on them all together, could I ask for some further discussion on the developer's agreement, number 188, just so we in the public kind of have the details on that?
Sure.
I don't know if the attorney or John.
I'll take the lead. The proposed amendment to the developer's agreement is for the Phoenix Chatham LLC, typically referred to as the Gunn development, because it's, the primary principal is Ronald Gunn. There is, as you know, some history behind that particular development, and I'll try to be brief and just give a quick summary of where we are. There was a number, during the course of construction, there was a number of violations and non-compliance issues related to the planning board approval, and Mr. Gunn was directed to go back to the planning board to amend and correct those deficiencies. There was a number of, I won't go through every one of the issues, but there was some exceedances of steep slopes. There was some construction issues related to a detention basins. There was stability issues regarding some side slopes, some retaining walls, a number of issues that need to be addressed. And all were deliberated and discussed at the planning board through several meetings and much testimony. The board ultimately did approve an amendment to that approval, and that resolution went into great detail regarding conditions that are imposed on the developer going forward. And some of the more critical conditions are deadlines. They impose very specific deadlines on when specific tasks need to be completed. And I believe the resolution is part of the attachment to the developer's agreement, and that and you can see some of the deadlines and then requirements that were imposed. The second issue that was not sent to the planning board was related to one portion of the roadway was not properly constructed, and there was an ongoing issue regarding how that was going to be corrected. Ultimately, the decision was made that that road needs to be completely removed. A substantial amount of the existing curbing is going to be removed, the stone, the subgrade, and then the subgrade is going to be recompacted, and the road is going to be completely reconstructed. The developer has put that in writing, is that is his intention to complete, reconstruct the roadway. As I noted, that was not addressed by the planning board because it wasn't a deficiency related. It was more of a construction deficiency versus a code deficiency. That work there isn't a firm deadline. Is actually gives the developer approximately 2 years to address that. And I didn't have a concern with that because basically reconstructing this road, if it's delayed, it's not impacting any adjoining property owners. It's not impacting no potential for erosion issues. Basically, if the developer chooses to hold off and redo this in a year, he's only hurting himself because basically he can't build the lots that are surrounding the lots. So no building permits will be issued until this road is reconstructed and done properly. So basically, the developer is really at his discretion of when he's going to correct it, and if he doesn't correct it for an extended period of time, the road right now is stabilized with stone. There is no concern with soil erosion. So the developer's agreement, a number of documents have been received to support updating the performance bond and other aspects of the agreement, but my recommendation is to accept the developer's agreement. I believe it does incorporate the safeguards that are needed to make sure that the development gets back on track.
So what happens if the developer misses the new deadlines?
Basically, the construction is at a point where there's highly improbable that is going to impact a neighboring property or cause the type of issues of soil erosion that occurred in the past. Basically, if he misses a deadline, he's not going to be able to get a building permit. He's not going to be able to close on a house. It's really, if he misses these, and again, we can issue stop work orders, we can issue summonses, but we're at a juncture in this development that who gets penalized the most if he misses the deadlines is himself versus impacting a neighbor or other incidental issue.
In furtherance of responding to that question, a new performance bond is going to be posted, and that new performance bond is going to be tied in to the dates in the planning board resolution. So where the prior performance bond had one date, this will have multiple dates tied into the completion dates in the resolution. The resolution before you tonight does accomplish a second item, and that is, you may recall that several months ago you declared the bond in default. Now, because the developer has returned to the planning board, has agreed in principle with an amendment to the redevelopers or to the developers agreement, that default is being recalled or rescinded. So the resolution does two things: authorizes the mayor to sign the amendment to the developers agreement and rescinds that default.
So, but I mean, the issue is, while it may not directly impact the work the surrounding homeowners, I mean, the surrounding homeowners want this thing done. I mean, they don't want to live in a state of disrepair. I know someone was trying to sell their house, and, you know, what's behind it is, you know, a construction zone, and that makes it harder to sell their house. So you're confident that we have sufficient safeguards built in to get this done, or are we going to be back here in 2 years when he misses these deadlines?
Well, we'll be back much sooner than that, because the majority of the work has to be done by the end of the year. And that's the majority of work associated with the deficiencies of repairing the basin, stabilizing slopes, and addressing those deficiencies. So those immediate issues are going to be addressed, and as I said, the construction, the reconstruction of the west cul-de-sac, that's where the problem was. It is an isolated area. I don't see that as being an impact to the neighbors. It's a good distance away, and it is isolated. You are correct that as the homes are constructed, if the homes are delayed in any way to what, you know, it's reflective of how the road was constructed, that would be problematic, because the road should have been constructed a lot faster. But the homes are being, at least the 4 immediate homes that are on the east cul-de-sac are under consideration, or new. One has been sold, and I believe the other 3 lots are being sold to another developer who has an experience in town of building houses relatively quickly, and have not had issues with them in the past. So I can speak for at least those 3 lots. If they're being constructed by this other developer, my experience with that other developer, I've not had erosion issues or complaints from neighbors and other issues.
And in fact, Mr. Mayor, one of the houses already has a foundation permit. That developer is interested in moving forward with the remainder, with framing and completing that house, and this process has stopped the engineer from issuing approval for the additional building permit. So you will see fairly immediate action on that, at least that one house moving forward.
Right. Any other questions?
I think, John, I think this was a clear case of it being easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission, because we've seen, by virtue of this new developer's agreement, we've had to backtrack and look at certain violations from egregious to the most trivial. And it has been a very lengthy process. Obviously, you've gone over it with a fine-tooth comb. Has the conclusions here, do you believe, are going to be enough to keep this from happening again in our township, in our neighborhoods? The penalties, the stop work orders, etc.? Because this has been something that probably should never happen again, in my estimation. It's just went too long. And
I will be frank that I believe the initial resolution prepared by the planning board had a number of conditions, had very stringent conditions on how this development was supposed to be undertaken to minimize the off-site impacts, or even eliminate those off-site impacts that occurred actually during construction. And the original developer's agreement did have conditions that should have been. So if you look back, and this should have happened. If the rules and conditions and what was approved by the planning board was followed, we would not have had a problem. Now again, I believe that everything has been very thorough regarding the conditions that are imposed. It's even more detail regarding the various different steps that he has to follow. So as long as it's being followed, there should be no problem with the remaining portion of development. That's fundamentally, as long as the rules are followed and conditions are followed, they don't anticipate any problem, but they have to be followed.
Yeah, well, I think that's the point, though. And I think that's where I got upset by this whole process. You know, it's like we can say you follow the rules. If someone doesn't follow the rules, there's got to be some consequences. And it seems like sometimes we're a little hesitant to lay down the hammer. And I think, you know, if this is a takeaway from this process to the planning board to say, all right, we got to redo our procedures or protocols in terms of when they break the rule one, it's like this happens, because what's been going on with this process and this development has been it's been ridiculous.
So then on the road issue, I guess that's what's troubling me. How do we get to the point where a road is constructed, complete, and then we say, oops, you know, it wasn't constructed properly. Do we not have sufficient controls in place so that as the road is being developed, we couldn't have said at some point, hey, something's going on here, and it needs to be corrected? And then the follow-up to that is, I mean, are those controls in place so that when the road is redone, we don't revisit the same issue that the road's done improperly?
I would say that there's been times where I've actually reached out to the police to stop contractors from working on site. I had an incident where I was out at the site with the DEP documenting erosion that left the site and impact wetlands, and that occurred on a Thursday. And on that Thursday, I spoke directly to Mr. Gunn. I saw him starting to set up the poor curb. I said, "You're under a stop work order. Do not pour that curb. You're under a stop work order," and reminded him. Friday morning, that curb was poured. So, yes, it's, the inspection was there, but, we're not there 24/7, and when the direction is given to stop work, it means stop work. It doesn't mean, continue. And so there's been instances like that, and it's just, it was a very frustrating process that, stop work orders were frankly ignored, and that's why the road was continued. Things were ignored.
So what's going to stop this time the same thing from happening?
Well, the difference with this time is that the majority of this site work is substantially complete. And so we're looking at, when you're looking at the entire scope of this project, it's 80+% complete. So we're only looking at the remaining 20%. So it's not as a significant undertaking that was done when they first broke ground. So now we're talking about more of just repairing areas versus complete reconstruction. So the amount of work that's left is substantially less than what we started.
So I guess my question is, if we have someone who on record has not followed what's supposed to be followed, do we need to build in any extra controls to make sure that that doesn't happen again?
Again, it's just anyone, basically, I cannot be there 24/7, basically, and that's the issue. If he's, and it gives us, even in the initial phase, he had to give us a detailed construction schedule, so I know every day what he's doing and what he's working on. And there has to be a professionalism here of that. If you give me a schedule and that's what you say you're going to follow, you have to follow it. And did we do periodic inspections just as a check? We did many of them. And many times that's when we found problems, and that's where we began. And that's why a lot of work is being ripped out and redone because inspections weren't done. They basically constructed this west cul-de-sac without even calling us. And we show up one day and it's done. And like we didn't see anything.
What I'm trying to come full circle is to prevent something like this from happening again, is can we somehow build into the process that it's the developer, when it's a certain violation, then there's certain triggers and it becomes the developer's cost to pay for, if necessary, a 24/7 monitor, so that someone is there so it doesn't happen. Is that possible, or is that not possible?
Inspection fees are covered by the municipal land use law. And the purpose of the municipal land use law is to achieve uniformity on how builders are treated from the top of the state to the bottom of the state. So there is your ordinances are built upon the municipal land use law. That type of individual requirement, I'd have to consider and think about more to determine whether in fact it is consistent with the municipal land use law, but anything of that type of a constraint would have to be within the four corners of the municipal land use law. Here you have, as I said, you have a new bond that is being posted. You have the bond specifically tied into the completion dates. I think that the township has done all it can in order to ensure that this will be completed. With respect to that west cul-de-sac, the road has not been completed. What has been constructed, John? There is no top coat.
There's no top paving, but the curbing is in and he placed stone.
So it's not a final road yet, and it is going to be torn up and reconstructed. If you'd like to consider for the future additional safeguards, that's something we can, I can speak with the engineer about and see how we can bolster the ordinance, but it has to be consistent with the municipal land use law, and that's what we've been following here in your ordinance. So if you want something else, we have to amend your existing ordinances and codify it.
Because obviously we've identified in this process that what we currently have was not sufficient to prevent this. So maybe we should look at something.
I can just say that all the conditions, all the laws, all the codes that we can draft, and it's irrelevant if someone's not going to follow them. And that's really what it comes down to in this case, is that they just weren't following what was approved and what was required. And they basically did what they want.
Yeah. Well, I think we said this, not to interrupt you, John, but it's like, as best we can, increase the penalties, people do it because they get away with it, and there's a slap on the wrist. So if we do something where it's not a slap on the wrist anymore, maybe the Mr. Guns of the world will think twice about this in the future.
Well, and that's the whole deal. I mean, notwithstanding the hypothetical timely and compliant completion of this project, what's to keep it from happening again? Or are we relying on the integrity and the compliance of developers going forward? And do we have the right, does the municipality have the right to vet people more carefully, or is that within?
This is, I have to say, this has been a very unique place.
Without a doubt.
I've been over 25 years experience. I've never experienced this before. This project is I've never seen that there's some gross, just not following what they're required at all, and just this has not been look at penalties. To have to reconstruct a road, and he has to reconstruct a lot of things that he did. Certainly there's penalties associated with not doing this work right, and he is feeling those penalties, I'm sure, and having to go back to the planning board and have to redo all these plans, and this has not been an inexpensive undertaking to correct the problems that were caused out there, and frankly, I think that would be a deterrent for this developer to do this again, because he kind of realized if he's trying to save money and cut corners and whatever the rationale was, this was not an inexpensive detour for him to have to go back and go to the board and issue this. We've issued a number of summonses. There's been an enormous amount of legal activity on this project, and we're also still in front of the municipal court. I have been issuing summonses weekly until the West cul-de-sac is done. We are in municipal court. We're going through discovery, and then we intend to do a trial, and we intend to go for fines. And so that is still open, and that is still being discussed.
So your fees when you're out there is who's paying for that?
The developers is paying for it. And I believe the language under the municipal land use law is that the inspection fees have to be reasonable. Now that's subjective. If you charge someone to go be asked to have someone stand out there 24/7, that's what courts may perceive that as being unreasonable. And especially if to have someone standing out there when the contractor specifically says, I'm not going to be there, and then you have someone there just because we don't trust him, I think the court's going to find that to be unreasonable. So that's where the balance is what's reasonable. And we have done spot inspections that he didn't call for inspections, but we went out anyway just to check what was going, and I think those were reasonable checks. But if we did those checks every single day, the courts may find that to be unreasonable.
Thanks, John. Anyone else?
John, I'd like to say thank you, because you and I have been working on the planning board on this case for month after month after month, and you've maintained such an even keel, such a professional demeanor. I know your feet have been held to the fire on, as I said before, from issues that were egregious violations down to the trivial, and it's been a very even-keeled process, and I think in a large part due to your professionalism. So I would just like to thank you publicly for having been such a calming force in a situation that is pretty incendiary for our township, particularly for the residents who are impacted immediately. Thank you.
I'm going to continue to stay out of it. I have lots to say, but I'm not going to.
Any other comments on the consent agenda? No. Is there a motion to approve?
Did we get them all?
Yep. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Gallup?
Yes to all.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mrs. Schwartz?
Yes.
Mayor Ritter?
Yes. We'll now move on to our first discussion item. This is what was mentioned by one of our residents. That's a Transportation Alternatives Program grant application. John, you want to
Thank you,
give a
Mayor.
brief overview?
Yep, this is a program that the DOT has been announcing approximately every 2 years, and it is funded through the Federal Highway Authority, so it's not related to the Transportation Trust. It's actually federal funds, and it's a program that it's unique, where it's related to projects that are affiliated to improving pedestrian safety, but also beautification and historic preservation. And it falls under a very broad spectrum regarding what you can apply for. It's not related to road resurfacing, so if we wanted to resurface roads, that wouldn't be covered under the program. That comes under the municipal aid. But pedestrian safety and beautification is one of the key disciplines that I typically see a lot of municipalities applying for. And so there is one project that I did develop some diagrams for, which it's installing sidewalk along River Road, Southern Boulevard, and into the Fairmont Avenue intersection. It's an area that we have submitted under the local DOT grants in the past. A few years back, there was interest in installing this project. And it is a location that the Safe Routes to School committee has been making recommendations to enforce. And it's also in our 1989 walkway, bikeway plan as being an area that was targeted for sidewalks. So basically the sidewalk, and really the improvement that, primary improvement is two. One, to improve the safety in the vicinity of the Southern Boulevard, Fairmount Avenue intersection, but also to connect the Chatham Glen, which is a very large community, to that intersection, where they can then continue with sidewalks down Fairmount or continue on sidewalks on Southern. So it's an area that would interconnect that walkway pathway that we have along Southern Boulevard. So the first map that I provided generally shows the location of where the sidewalk would go and where some proposed crosswalks would be.
John, is that black sidewalk up, is that
That's
already
existing.
there?
Yeah, that's existing. That's existing. It's just, and again, these are very schematic and not very in great detail, but just to give an illustration of the approximate scope of the work. There is one area near Buxton where it's identified on the plan as being pavers. The thought is to improve that bus stop area and actually maybe add some type of nice treatment there to enhance it. So if you go to the next slide, it basically shows along River Road, and this would be consistent also going up Southern, is to basically have, clear some of the vegetation, make the edge of the road neat, and then just bring that right up to the road. Once we get to the schoolhouse, they would require some probably modifications or installation, some retaining walls, a little unique getting into that one where the driveway is for the schoolhouse, but that would have to be incorporated into the project. And then the last slide is just showing that area in the vicinity of by Buxton, and told my architect to just throw something together quickly, so it's not perfect, but that's thinking along those lines, to do some type of a monument, something to pronounce Chatham Township. We could set it back further and have flowers, and then have some pavers in the front, just to give a larger area, but just to give just a feel for something that we can do in this area. It does fall under beautification, so this would be something that the DOT would fund. So the grants, they were announced approximately a month ago that they're available for applications to be prepared. They're due early November to the DOT. So basically in October we would need to do a resolution if we want to proceed with this project or another project. We would just need to get that on the October one of the October agendas so we can get this submitted.
I know this is I assume it's county area. The two triangles at the bottom of Snake Hill there. Is there any way that can be incorporated into this as well?
Some type of beautification in there, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's always been an eyesore. And what would be, so in terms of submitting the grant, is there a dollar amount on this, or we just?
Dollar amount, we would, under the TAP grants, we submit for 100% of the grant amount, and I'm probably in the 350 range for this project. So we would request $350,000 for the DOT to cover it. The DOT did indicate that this grant round, they're going to also offer the engineering grants, so you can utilize their consultants to do the engineering, and so at least that's what they told me a couple months ago. So I'm hoping that also comes. So this could be a project which is minimal cost to actually implement.
Right. That includes clearing all of that side of Southern Boulevard?
Yes, yes.
That's a mess.
Just that path, yeah, it is a mess. And then I think it would clean it up, and then we would actually do some trimming along it so that you just clean up the whole edge of the road all the way up.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the lamp or the light posts here, those be replaced as well over on
page 3?
Yeah, on page 3. Like, I know New Vernon's got like brown
Oh, here, take an extra.
lamppost, so to speak,
The
more,
beautification is awesome.
less,
You want to get, okay, we can propose that. I mean,
Yeah.
we would probably bring the cost up closer to 500, but we could certainly request that.
I would think would ask, and well, the worst they could say is no, right?
Yeah, we could certainly ask for more decorative lighting and more modern lighting,
Mm-hmm.
and incorporate and just redo the whole intersection.
That's a lot of work. That is a lot of work. Are there any residents that are impacted by this at all, John? I mean, I know that there are some homes on the opposite side of Southern Boulevard. I don't know whether they're occupied. Hillside, I don't believe there's anybody.
We're following
Down at that
township
corner?
property along the entire area, and then we're crossing River Road with a sidewalk, and there's a small, we'd have to do a new handicap ramp on the opposite side of River Road, but that would just be within our right-of-way and just tie into an existing sidewalk.
At the entrance to Heritage Drive there?
Heritage Drive, there's a
Right.
sidewalk there already, so we would just tie there. So the only property that, and you have to may change this, but right in front of the church, having just a section of sidewalk, so you have four-way crosswalks all the way around. So
Right.
if someone's walking on that side, the church side along Fairmont, they can ultimately come in and just,
There's a residence on 2 of those corners there, one on Buxton, but that's behind the township property, and then
It
there's,
would be in the right-of-way, and it's actually, they have a fence, so I
Right.
believe it'd be on the opposite side of the fence, so there'd be really no impact.
and the other one on the corner of Fairmount and Southern on the downslope. I guess that would be sort of northerly.
Right now, I would anticipate tying into that corner of Buxton and not go to that other side of Southern.
In terms of our open space off of Southern there, does it come right up to the road, or no? Or
We would have to, the right-of-way does extend in that
it
area.
does? So I'm just wondering, like, off the sidewalk, it's something, open space might consider is creating a new trail.
Well, that's what I'm thinking here as I'm looking at this. And John, is there any chance to include the Open Space Committee in kind of a discussion and maybe to start, what I'm thinking here is, this is a pretty traditional sidewalk right along the road. Is there any way to offset it from the curb by a certain amount? I mean, short amount, like 10 feet, to get a little screening in between the road and a walking trail, or even more than that, so it's more of a walking trail and less of a sidewalk.
Mike, I think the problem with that is that once you start getting into the woods, so to speak, maintenance becomes a larger issue. And certainly coming up Southern Boulevard, that's very steep in there. That construction's already going to be difficult. So if you're talking about trying to set it back and cut through the woods, I don't think Rich is going to like maintaining that.
I think safety becomes an issue too.
Safety does. You'd have trees overhanging and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but I probably could make the argument that safety from the traffic, if it was 10 feet off the road,
Understood.
that
Yeah,
might be
yeah,
a safety plus.
Right, I think that's an interesting compromise, although, you know, then you get maybe non-visibility, and then you're on the sidewalk and you don't know what's there.
What's the right distance is a good question.
But to
Yeah,
my
I always
point,
think it's a good idea to keep it within the right-of-way. So wherever the right-of-way line is, I think you're kind of, and the grant may even speak to that. Typically sidewalks are located in the right-of-way, correct?
They are. I would just, we have to strictly follow DOT requirements, and we're starting to get into a gray area for going off the right-of-way into trails, and I think we may run into some issues regarding, they may even require some lights to be installed off into the property, and it may just get a little more complicated. And we have to remember that the grants, it is a very competitive grant program, so we don't want to go in too high, and we don't want to try to be in something that's really attractive and appealing to the people that are reviewing the grant.
Not too lofty, though.
Not too off the beaten path with,
Right.
With it. So I think making it more consistent with their requirements of installing a sidewalk, install it within the right of way.
John, is it fair to say that these grants are intended to enhance pedestrian safety on a transportation route as opposed to a recreational use on a trail?
Correct. So
could we call for some trees to be planted along the sidewalk? Does it look so industrial, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what about maintenance? Regular shoveling and things like that?
Well, the issue is come up a number of times with these federal grants is does maintenance require removal of snow? And then we've always presented to them that we will maintain it if the concrete heaves or it's a tripping hazard, we will replace it, but we've never committed to removing it for snow. We've done that for the Safe Routes to School grants and everything. We've always put that in there. So they haven't rejected it yet. So.
Right. So what would be the next steps from here?
Okay. The only thing is I'm just thinking about the comment. We may replacing all the I guess I have to just talk to our traffic and see how the cost that's going to go into with all the traffic signals that are out there, and if that's going to start pushing us over the top of where we're asking 500, 600, 700,000, and then we're going through the motions then versus if we can get a project more in the 300, 350 range, that just increases our probability of getting something. And then we could always consider phases too. We can break the project into phases, and another phase is that we can just, because you already have the foundation, so you can go in and just change the head and do that in phase two. So we would want to try and keep the project, try to keep it below 400, I would say. Once you're above that.
So next step is a resolution at the next meeting authorizing the submission of the grant? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Is everyone in agreement with
That's
that?
great.
And at the time we submit the grant, we'd have the location and everything pretty firm. They would approve a specific project at that point, so we would have, how much opportunity we have to flex it?
We have to describe as having the general project limits, the start and finish of where the area that we're doing. We can describe that we're going to be putting new crosswalks in, adding the new sidewalks, but until you get into design, it may change slightly. So you put enough contingencies into the cost so it covers any of the once you get into the final design. So because when we're doing these grant applications, I'm not diving into it and designing it. I'm putting a schematic together and putting enough cost to get in the grant to cover a project of this size, but once you get into design, you'll start getting into some of the more nitty issues. But just make sure that I have enough cost in there to plant trees, to remove trees, to put enough sidewalk in to accommodate it. So if we end up finding that the sidewalk over by the church needs to be modified other than what I'm showing here, that's not going to be a major change. But if we want to then say we want to extend that sidewalk further, or we want to cut it back, the DOT is very, very critical over, if you're going to commit to a start and a finish, and that's what they want to know in the general scope.
Okay. But Tom's point about staying within the right-of-way,
yeah,
if we did find that we had a little bit of flexibility with the right-of-way and it fit within the expense forecast that you're looking at,
yes,
we still have the chance to look at that and think about it anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
And how much do we have to bounce this off Morris County, since these are their roads?
Now that you're asking for a resolution, I will contact them,
Okay.
and it's usually not an issue to get their endorsement. They really haven't had any issues with installing sidewalks within the county right away.
Right. And what about the traffic signals? If it came down to doing anything with them, would they separately, if we were to phase in an issue that involved the traffic signals at the top of that hill?
We have to modify the traffic signals to provide for pedestrian push buttons and the signals, and that would be incorporated into the project.
Into this project?
Into this
as
project.
opposed to the county?
Yeah, that would be in this project. We would be obligated to do that because we're working within the intersection. So we have to make those modifications. It's just, do we replace, and we'll probably have to put in some pedestals with the countdowns and what you typically see. But do we have to replace poles? That starts to get a little bit more expensive.
Definitely.
Great. Any other comments?
John. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. Thank you, John. We'll now open up for another hearing of citizens. If anyone wants to come forward, we'll close out the hearing of citizens. We'll move off to an executive session. Tom, you want to read the resolution?
Yes, sir. Resolution 2016 P14. Resolution of the Township Committee of the Township of Chatham in the County of Morris, New Jersey, authorizing conference of the Township Committee with the public excluded. Whereas NJSA 10:4-12 of the Open Public Meetings Act permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas the Township Committee of the Township of Chatham is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, now therefore be it resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Chatham, County of Morris, State of New Jersey as follows. 1. The public shall be excluded from discussion of the specified subject matter. 2. The general nature of the subject matter to be discussed is as follows. A. Litigation in the matter of the Township of Chatham for a judgment of compliance of its third-round housing element and fair share plan, docket number MRSL 1659-15, and B. Litigation T-Mobile Northeast LLC versus Township of Chatham, docket number MRSC 75-16. It is anticipated that the minutes of the subject matter of the executive session will be made public upon conclusion of the matter under discussion, and in any event, when appropriate, pursuant to NJSA 10:4-7 and 4-13. The committee will come back into regular session and may take further action. This resolution shall take effect immediately.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Bob, second?
Yes.
Mr. Gallup?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mrs. Schwartz?
Yes.
Mayor Ritter?
Yes.